What is shakin', Internet? This is Saltz bringing you the How to Tank for Dummies Guardian Druid Guide. This guide is intended for those who are new to tanking and will cover the talents, abilities, and general playstyle of Guardian Druids in the Legion 7.0.3 patch. Now, if you're completely new to tanking, check out my basic tanking guide in the annotation in the video now, or the link below. If you're just looking for changes for Legion tanking versus Warlords tanking, click on the other annotation or link to jump further in the video. So, to start with, Druid tanks become bears to be the mighty meat shield for their allies. Bears specialize in getting massive amounts of health and taking bonus healing from their group. They have a good mix of damage, survivability, and mobility, and the fact that they can utilize the other forms and large variety of abilities for druids makes them a great addition to any team. Now before you transform and roll out, you're going to need to set up a few things. Primarily, your talents. You'll be getting a new talent every 15 levels up to level 90, and then a final talent point to spend at level 100. Each tier gives you a bunch of different options, so I'll briefly cover each tier and then give you the recommendation for tanking. Now, at level 15, the first tier is open to you. This includes Brambles, which gives bonus damage by reflecting damage back at enemies, Bristling Fur, which gives you a new ability to gain lots of rage from taking damage over a few seconds, and Blood Frenzy, which causes Thrash to generate more rage for you passively. Now, as far as tanking goes, Bristling Fur and Blood Frenzy are really the only options, since Brambles just gives you more bonus damage. I would recommend Blood Frenzy over Bristling Fur because I love passive talents, even though Bristling Fur is much better when there's only one big bad boss to hit. You just have to remember to use it if you take it. Now, at level 30, Tier 2 opens. It includes Guttural Roars, which generally makes you your 2 roar moves, Stampeding Roar and Incapacitating Roar, quite a bit better. Displacer Beast, which lets you teleport a short distance and get bonus speed. Or Wild Charge, which gives you a new ability that provides a range of dashes and leaps depending on what form you're in. While all three of these are useful in different situations, my go-to is Guttural Roars. Again, because it's passive, but also because Stampeding Roar is just a great move you should be using to speed everyone up. Now at level 45 you get Tier 3 talents, which includes Balance, Feral, and Restoration affinities. Each of these gives you access to moves for the different specs, range DPS, melee DPS, and healing respectively, and gives you a little passive. Balance makes all your moves go 5 yards further, Feral speeds you up by 15%, and Restoration gives you passive healing. For straight tanking, Restoration is the best. Feral looks appealing with the bonus move speed, but you have plenty of dashes and Moonfire so that you don't need the extra speed very often, if ever. Balance isn't bad, but it isn't really anything to write home about either. The passive healing is great, and the ability to cast Swiftmen when not tanking is also very good. You'll unlock Tier 4 talents at level 60. This tier has Mighty Bash, a single target hard stun, Mass Entanglement, which roots all enemies in an area, and Typhoon, which knocks enemies back and dazes them. Now this is completely situational, but I think it normally comes down to Mighty Bash or Typhoon. I like Typhoon because it can interrupt an entire group of enemies, while Mighty Bash is just a very nice single target stun, just with a longer cooldown. Both have merits, while I never use Mass Entanglement, because the root breaks on damage constantly, making it useless in just a ton of situations. At level 75, you'll unlock Tier 5, which has Soul of the Forest, adding damage and rage to your Mangle attack, Incarnation Guardian of Ursoc, which adds an ability that allows you to mangle and growl constantly for 30 seconds, and makes Mangle hits multiple targets during that time, and Galactic Guardian, which gives you free Moonfires and lets some of your Moonfires generate rage. As much as I used to love Incarnation Guardian of Ursoc, nothing comes close to Galactic Guardian, aka Disco Bear. You'll be hitting everything with Moonfires all the time, and get a ton of rage at casting the Moonfire procs. And best of all, it's passive, mostly. Now more on this in the abilities and rotation section. Now, Soul of the Forest is pretty worthless, since it doesn't generate as much rage as Galactic Guardian, and isn't really situationally great like Incarnation. Tier 6 unlocks at level 90, and includes Earth Warden, which reduces damage of auto attacks against you every so often, Guardians of Elune, which lets you mangle make your active mitigation better, and Survival of the Fittest, which reduces the cooldown of your big defensive cooldowns by 1/3. I can't stress enough how bad Earth Warden is. Don't ever take that in its current state. Guardian of the Loon is the best overall because it makes all of your active mitigation skills that much better, whereas Survival of the Fittest makes your big cooldowns even more useful. Either is good, but Guardian of Loon is going to be better in most fights that don't last several minutes or more. Now finally, your last tier of talents is unlocked at level 100. These include Rend and Tear, which increases your thrash damage and adds damage reduction to it, Lunar Beam, which is a new ability that places a big beam of light in place to heal you and damage enemies, and Pulverize, which consumes thrash damage stacks on targets to give you reduced damage. Pulverize used to be amazing, but now that thrash has a cooldown, it takes too long to build up stacks to be effective. Lunar Beam is great if you have to stand in place, but anytime you're on the move, it gets really useless really fast. Rend and Tear is the best choice in most situations because of the active damage reduction on thrash stacks, which is great for single target or AoE. And best of all, it's completely passive! Yay! So, for a quick recap of talents, I would suggest Blood Frenzy, Guttural Roars, Restoration Affinity, Typhoon, or possibly Mighty Bash, Galactic Guardian, Guardian of Loon, and Rend and Tear for your talent lineup. Now that we've covered talents, let's talk about stats and items. As a Guardian Druid, you'll be wearing leather armor, but more importantly, you're looking for specific secondary stats. The best stat for Guardian Druids is Mastery, due to increased health and healing received. With the general lack of dodge and basic armor and stuff, you'll be taking big hits, so you want as much health as you can get. Now the next stat you'll want to prioritize is Haste, because nearly all of your moves will work off of it. Specifically, Mangle, Thrash, and Frenzied Regeneration will all come up faster with it, which gives you more rage for mitigation and self-healing. Otherwise, Versatility and Critical Strike are good for reduced damage and increased dodge. Now, all other secondary stats are not as important, so you should really try to get these stats in this order: Mastery, Haste, Versatility, and Critical Strike. Alright, now that we've discussed talents and stats, let's cover basic playstyle briefly. Druids are rage-based tanks, which means you will be gaining rage from using specific moves, and use that rage on other moves. Most of your rage generation moves are just damaging moves, while your rage spending moves are your active mitigation. Active mitigation moves are abilities that will reduce incoming damage to you for a limited amount of time. Now, let's start discussing actual moves. Guardian Druids have about 5 moves they'll be using constantly: Mangle, Thrash, Moonfire, Swipe, and Maul. Mangle is your primary go-to move. It does single target damage and gives you rage. Mangle has a short cooldown but will constantly be reset. The button will glow when this happens. Basically, you should be pressing this button whenever it's available, as it's your big hitting rage generator. Thrash is a decent area of effect, or AoE move. More importantly, it actually adds a damage over time, or DOT, stack to everything it hits. This move should be used on cooldown, the same as Mangle. Moonfire is our ranged attack that does damage and a DOT. This should be used primarily to keep up the DOT on your target, but you'll also have to use it on all the targets individually if you want it to be most effective. It can also be used to pull ranged mobs, or at least get their focus on you. Now, a quick note. If you took the Galactic Guardian talent, which I recommended, you do not have to use Moonfire on all targets, as they'll get refreshed constantly through your AoEs. Additionally, Moonfire will constantly proc and glow, and when you use it, then it will add 15 rage. Basically, if you're taking Galactic Guardian, you should be using Moonfire whenever it's glowing, and it should be higher priority than Thrash or Mangle even, because it gives so much rage. Swipe is another AoE move. It has no cooldown, so this is your spam move. Use it whenever you have nothing else to use, or if you have a big pack of mobs that just spawned and you need to get aggro on them, and Thrash is down. Finally, we have Maul. Maul is the only basic attack move that you have that costs rage. It's intended to be used as a rage dump, or whenever you have way too much rage. It's a bonus move that you can use whenever you're nearly full on rage. Those are the basic moves you have and the basic priority they should be used in. Mangle, Thrash, and Moonfire are your top 3, depending on talents. If you took the recommended talents I suggest, Moonfire will be top priority when it's flashing, for bonus rage, through Galactic Guardian, and Thrash will be second, to keep up the big stacks for your damage reduction through Rend and Tear. In general, use whatever is flashing first, then use the others whenever they're off cooldown. Swipe is used whenever none of the other three are available, and Maul can be used whenever you have too much rage. Now, for active mitigation. Bears have 3 active mitigation moves: Iron Fur, Mark of Ursol, and Frenzied Regeneration. Iron Fur increases your armor for 6 seconds and costs 45 rage. If you use it repeatedly, it will stack up. So if you build lots of rage, you can use this to gain absurd amount of armor. Mark of Ursol is the same thing for magic damage. Reduces it for 6 seconds and costs 45 rage. Sadly, it doesn't stack up, but it's still a great tool for reducing magic damage. Frenzied Regeneration is your healing move. Without going into too much detail, it'll heal you for half of all the damage you just took in the last 5 seconds for the next 3 seconds. Basically, if you just took a lot of damage and you hit the Frenzied button, you'll get lots of healing for the next couple of seconds. There's a lot of nuances in using it, but let's just keep it simple. It does cost a small amount of rage and works on a charge system. It can have 2 charges, and you get a new charge every 24 seconds. That means if you use one, you'll have 1 more charge, and you'll get another charge in 24 seconds. The long and short of it is that you will have to use Iron Fur or Mark of Ursol before the big hits, and, annoyingly enough, you'll have to know if the hit's going to be magic damage or physical damage to pick the right one. In general, Iron Fur will be your go-to unless you're absolutely sure it's magic damage through a spell or fire or something like that. Now, Frenzied Regeneration, on the other hand, is something you use reactively, or after a big hit instead of before it. Take a big chunk of damage through a special move, then pop Frenzied for some big heals. Unfortunately, I can't give you much better advice for these moves, as it totally depends on the boss you're fighting and what kind of moves they're using. So you'll just have to learn the encounters before deciding which to use. But remember to always use Frenzied after taking those big hits. Additionally, Guardian Druids have 2 big defensive cooldowns: Bark Skin and Survival Instincts. Bark Skin is a small damage reduction for 12 seconds on a 90-second cooldown. If you took the Survival of the Fittest talent, not one I recommended, it'll be on a 60-second cooldown, meaning you should use it every single fight. Either way, you should be using this constantly whenever you're taking any amount of damage, or when you're taking multiple adds. Survival Instincts is a big damage reduction for 6 seconds on a charge counter. You get 2 charges of it, and a new charge comes back every 4 minutes. In most fights, using this early will be the only way to get to use it at 3 times in a fight ever, but you really shouldn't worry about it too much. In general, if the fight requires you to have a big cooldown for super moves, this is what you'll be using. And if it doesn't, feel free to use whenever you're going to be taking lots of extra damage, such as like when ads spawn. Outside of these basic moves and defensive cooldowns, there are a number of other abilities that should be on your hotbar, or your hotkeys. First is Growl, which is your basic taunt move. You'll be using this whenever you need to swap tanks, or when there's a ranged enemy that is already being burned down by your group, meaning your Moonfire alone won't make them focus their attention on you. Next is Incapacitating Roar. This move will CC all enemies in a large radius for just a couple of seconds. It's not overly useful, but definitely has a lot of potential use. Stampeding Roar is a great move that you should be using a lot. It will allow you and any nearby allies to run quite a bit faster for a few seconds. For other classes that aren't nearly as mobile, this is a godsend, so feel free to use it liberally during fights, or at specific times when you know people will be on the move. Finally is Rebirth, which is your in-battle revive. You'll want to use this on dead targets. Surprise! Since you're a tank, this is probably going to only be used on the other tank or your best healer. Be prepared to pop a defensive cooldown if you need to use this while tanking just to be safe. You don't want to join your friend. Additionally, you'll get some bonus moves from your affinity talent you picked. Most really aren't terribly useful as far as tanking goes, but Swift Mend is a pretty nice move if you took the Restoration, which I recommended. You'll have to swap out of bear form to use it, so only do so when you're not actively tanking. Now, outside of the above moves, you'll additionally have your charge and interrupt move all in one, Skull Bash. This move allows you to dash to a nearby enemy and interrupt them. This is a fantastic move that you should be using a lot for both getting to new adds and for interrupting those troublesome casters. Now that we've discussed all the abilities, let's do a quick recap. You have active mitigation that should be used before big hits in Iron Fur for armor and Mark of Ursol for magic, and healing that should be used after those big hits in Frenzied Regeneration. Bark Skin should be used constantly throughout any fight, while Survival Instinct should be used for those big hits or for lots of ads. Use Stampeding Roar and Skull Bash to move around, while using Skull Bash or Incapacitating Roar to interrupt their enemies. Rebirth your dead friends, and be the bear they deserve. Now with all this information, you're now ready to go out there and be a bear. If you're looking for help on a specific dungeon or raid, click on the link in the video now to jump to my dungeon guides. Otherwise, listen on as we discuss the differences to Guardian Druids from the Warlords expansion. So, for the differences in Legion, we start with the big bummer that is Thrash and Lacerate. Thrash now has a cooldown and Lacerate is completely gone. To make up for it, we now get a cooldownless swipe, and Thrash now acts as Lacerate's DOT for moves like Pulverize. Additionally, we've lost Fairy Fire, and it's been replaced with Moonfire for ranged pulls. Because of this, Moonfire and its DOT is now pretty much part of the main rotation, mixed with Mangle and Thrash. Now for the biggest change, our active mitigation. Instead of dodging attacks now, we're just sacks of meat. No more increased dodge. Now we have Iron Fur to increase our armor, and Mark of Ursal to reduce magic damage. I personally hated this idea when it was part of the Protection Warriors kit last expansion, but now bears have to deal with deciding if we want more physical resistance or magical resistance. Yay! Additionally, Frenzied Regeneration no longer gives us flat healing. Instead, it heals for half of all damage we took in the last 5 seconds as a HOT for the next 3 seconds. Now this is a big change that I do not like, because without Healing Touch, we have a lot less self-direct healing. Now, most of the other moves pretty much remain the same. Maul is still around as a rage dump, our big cooldowns are still Bark Skin for little hits and Survival Instincts for big ones, and we still have Skull Basher and Stampeding Roar for mobility. I like the new talents we've been given, although Pulverize is now pretty worthless since it takes away our Thrash stacks, and Thrash has a cooldown. So, we really can't get those stacks back as easily, and you can't have Pulverize up 100% of the time. But, let's sigh. All in all, I think Druids are a great tanking class, but less cool than they were in Warlords. I miss dodging everything and being able to heal so much. But as our gear catches up and we get more stamina and mastery, maybe it'll all even out. Alright, hopefully you've enjoyed this guide for dummies. Please like, favorite, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and, as always, you keep it salty, Internet.